Harry's Wife, part 104.72. Has he gone? Hello, I'm H.G. Tudor. There continues to be speculation about the state of the Sussexes' marriage. High-profile individuals find themselves often facing these repeated pieces of speculation and queries. And, of course, this is manifested in the past. We do know, of course, because this is a dynamic between narcissist and victim, that this is not a happy marriage. See parts passing where I explain the dynamic between the two of them. And also, if you have not already accessed the excellent Sussex series, I recommend that you do, so not only will you understand more about narcissism, but you'll also understand precisely how their relationship will play out, going down one of three routes. The Queen's funeral took place 2 months ago, and we recall the image of Harry looking downtrodden, the blowing out of his cheeks, looking like he'd had enough of it all. I analysed that incident and the exchange and involvement with his wife, see parts passing. But what has happened since then? Well, there's a marked sea change, it must be said. In the past, we have seen the fact that Harry and his handler go nearly everywhere together. Of course, they are not joined at the hip, and couples do their own things, but because of her need to control him, and the way that he is an extension of her, they are regularly seen together. So, the Invictus Games became the Harry's Wife's Games. She turned up at the Platinum Jubilee celebrations. She was there at the funeral. She pushed her way in at the polo. More about that in a forthcoming video. She attended the UN with him, operating the grip of doom. Various instances where the two of them were seen. They've been earlier this year seen dining out, of course, with Eugenie and Jack Brooksbank. But there has been a sea change, and a marked one, in the last couple of months. Harry has been seen doing more on his own. First of all, we saw him giving a word salad speech, courtesy, of course, his indoctrination by his wife at the Scaling Up event. And this recently, it's Harry in Hawaii, which sounds like the title of a rather dodgy Carry On film. But there he was, on his Jack Jones, on his Todd, on his lonesome. Meanwhile, Harry's Wife has continued with the Archetype series. Now, whilst this was recorded some time ago, there would always be scope for involving him through a bit of editing, a bit of add-on and so forth, but that hasn't happened. It's all been about her. What was supposedly a joint enterprise between the two of them, has turned into, unsurprisingly, the Harry's Wife show. She did the Variety interview and photo shoot. Harry wasn't seen in the background. No juggling the balls this time. He was nowhere to be found. There was the attendance at the JJ concert, but to my mind, that seemed like he'd gone there and she decided to turn up later on. She arrived after him and then spent her time pouring at him, and I suspect that he didn't really want her to be there. And whilst this was portrayed as some kind of date night, the pictures did not support that. And then, more recently, of course, we've had the date, or supposed date, at the Duchess restaurant. Something about this doesn't stack up. First of all, ordinarily, when the Duchess of Delusion goes somewhere, photos abound. When she is one of our escaped Jowers, she pops down to the shops at Monty Shit Show. Lo and behold, the paparazzi are there. When she pops out again, this time accompanied by an aide to do a bit of shopping, she is photographed by the paparazzi. And as we all know, she ensures they are tipped off. It's almost no pictures it didn't happen with Harry's wife, and she has to get the maximum return for the prime aims by being photographed at these various events. So she's often seen entering something, exiting something, getting into a car, strolling across the road, whatever it might be. There were no such pictures. The tone of the reportage was rather odd, because it was all about how lovely they were and how pleasant they were, Well, that should be a default setting, and to actually have to have it publicised that you were being pleasant suggests that it's been written by somebody over-egging the pudding, and I query whether it actually occurred at all. Furthermore, the questions raised about whether this event actually occurred because of a further article that has appeared in New Idea in Australia, which tells us Prince Harry and Harry's wife's date night disaster. Well, what's this? Previously, we were all told that they had a very pleasant and jolly time and were nice to everybody at the Duchess restaurant. But according to this, there's something different. Romance goes wrong on the awkward evening out. What started as a romantic date night in an idyllic mountain town ended in disaster for Prince Harry and Harry's wife, the Duchess of Sussex. According to reports out of the United States, the couple were seen treating themselves to dinner last week without the kids at the Duchess, a low-key Burmese bakery restaurant. But sources say their relaxing evening soon turned sour. They were having a nice time chatting over some tandoori chicken, which is an unusual choice for a vegan, I suppose, about the kids and school and the upcoming US election. You know, usual husband and wife stuff, says a source. They blended in at first, but then things got frosty between them. The source further reveals that the 38-year-old British prince got up and walked out towards the end of their meal, leaving the 41-year-old former actress and their fellow diners stunned. It's rather strange. That must be the same diners that said they were ever so nice and had a lovely evening. The Duchess is a fairly intimate sort of place, where it's hard not to notice if the people at the next table are bickering. It's a celebrity-friendly place, but it was a surprise to see them there, given that they have all of Santa Barbara's best restaurants outside their door. A source close to the Sussexes say this is just the latest in a long list of rows the couple has had following a hectic couple of weeks. They are stressed. They have a few big projects coming out soon, and Harry, who has always been loved by the public, is particularly nervous about how he will be received, given he seems to have lost his golden touch, says a source. Harry's wife, meanwhile, is fixated on Harry's family, and whether they'll allow her children to have and use their royal titles. For Harry, that's the least of his problems, and he's getting sick of talking about it when there's bigger things going on. If she brought up the prince and princess stuff for Archie and Lily, especially in public in a small town, where gossip spreads like wildfire, there's no doubt he would have got huffy, the source explains. Accordingly, we have a rather odd situation. Did the date night take place? If it did, was it pleasant? Or did things get frosty between them? Conflicting reports. I leave it for you to determine what you believe, but to my mind, I suspect that there wasn't actually any date night at all. Is this something that a narcissist would engage in, pretending to have done something when they didn't? Absolutely. We also, of course, only recently see parts pass him have the situation of making it seem as if they were together celebrating Remembrance Day, in a little bit of chicanery with the publication of an Invictus photo on Remembrance Day or thereabouts, giving the impression that they were at something together at that date, when of course it was clear that this was an old photograph, once examined further, and as we know, Harry was in Hawaii. Another attempt to make it seem like they're together when they were actually separate. It's clear, therefore, that they are now doing more things separately. But knowing that this is the dynamic between a narcissist and a victim, what can we understand about that? Based on the evidence that we've seen, which is they are not doing as much together, they are seen doing things separately, which contrasts with how they went on with things previously, how do we interpret that evidence combined with what we understand about the narcissistic dynamic? Well, the first option is they are simply just doing things separately. I find that unlikely. Reason being, Harry's wife needs to assert control over him, and if all was rosy in the garden, she would continue to do so and ensure that they would be seen doing those things together, and Harry wouldn't be allowed out on his own that much, or at all, because she would always accompany him. So she would have turned up the scaling up event. He wouldn't have gone to Hawaii, or both of them would have done. Or they'd have turned up at some alternative event and created a new photograph to post on Archwell. They would have turned up at the concert together. Now, of course, You might say, well, there are instances whereby they'd be doing separate things and could turn up at different times. Absolutely. But the point is, you've got to remember that she is a narcissist, and her paranoia abounds, and she has that subconscious need to assert control over Harry. He is an extension of her, and therefore she will want to ensure that she is always around him to assert that control over him, to gain the fuel, and to assert control. She wouldn't allow him to keep doing these things separately, and she wouldn't engage in doing things separately if all was well. So a simple explanation of, oh, they're just doing things separately, isn't valid. Might it be that he has had enough and he's out? Well, this is a possibility, of course. He may well have escaped. However, I would expect that if this was the case, that he would have looked to come back to the United Kingdom. However, it might be he feels he isn't able to do so as a consequence of what has gone on between him and his family. But I would think that if he had escaped and explained what had gone on, notwithstanding the problems that had arisen, his father and his brother would still welcome him back and be supportive of him. Indeed, they would probably regard it as a positive step that he has got away from his handler. And therefore, I would have expected that he would have made a return to the United Kingdom. I suspect, therefore, that he has not yet escaped her, even though he is spending time away from her. Could it be that she has kicked him out, and he's at a loose end and he's pottering around not sure what to do, doesn't want to come back to the United Kingdom because he feels that he can't, because he'll receive a frosted reception, plenty of I told you so's, and possibly having his pants pulled down and his bottom spanked into pinkdom as a consequence of his conduct. And therefore he feels, I've got to stay here. Maybe he doesn't even want to admit that the marriage is over, and that's why he's staying in the United States. Those are, of course, all possibilities. But again, I don't see yet that a disengagement trigger has occurred to cause her to kick him out. Although his stock has been plummeting as of late, he still has some value to her by virtue of the connection. And I would see that she's more likely to continue to hold on to him whilst her narcissism drives her to shore up her own position before he becomes either surplus to requirements because she brings somebody else in and boots him out, or by shoring up her own position, it accentuates his lack of usefulness to her, effectively the breakdown clause of the disengagement trigger, so that she then gets rid of him. I don't see that we're at that point yet. So if it's not the case of them doing things separately, and he hasn't left and she hasn't kicked him out, what are we left with? I see that what's still going on here is that he is in a sustained devaluation. What's happening is she basically is giving him silent treatments and letting him wander off. Because it's her decision that she doesn't want to involve herself with him as she focuses on crap like the variety shoot, wanking over arsey wipes, trying to involve herself perhaps politically and scheming in terms of working with PR advisors to shore up her position. Quite simply, he's an afterthought. And because he's in the sustained devaluation, she's basically saying, get out of the way. You're under my feet. Go and play polo. Go and look at a war memorial. And therefore, because she's sending him away, she has control because it's her decision. She might even be saying, just get out of here, I don't care what you're doing. It might be that she doesn't say anything at all to him, and he just thinks, well, she's not talking to me, I might as well wander off somewhere else and go and do something. And therefore, because he's in this devaluation, and she decides that she's content for him to stay out of the way, therefore, that means she has control. Her fuel needs are being met from other people that she's involving herself with. And, of course, her narcissism is guiding her to take steps to look out for number one. Because his brand is tanking, because people aren't that interested in them as a couple, and that the risk of the loss of the titles looms, and the not granting of the titles with regard to the children, it may well be that she's being advised, look, you can't rely on his royal status for much longer. You need to start doing stuff that's about you, hence the variety shoot, the lack of involvement in archetypes, and that she is now trying to salvage the position by reinventing herself again. And therefore, he is not wanted in all of that, because her narcissism has convinced her that he is the problem, that he is affecting the brand, and therefore she is content for him to skedaddle off and do whatever else he wants. He doesn't like it, but he gets on with it, possibly feeling a degree of relief from respite of not having to put up with her shooting him baleful looks, denigrating him, triangulating him, putting him down, and all the other devaluations that take place. So to my mind, there is a clear shift in their relationship since the funeral, and there's a worsening of relations between them. Of that, I have no doubt. Whether he has left, I see as doubtful. I don't think she's yet ready to get rid of him, but I think the devaluation has got worse for him, and she's now focused more on herself and shoring up that position, leaving him to his own devices. Where will this lead to? Well, it would then become increasingly less likely that the position of the roller coaster of sustained devaluation, respite period, sustained devaluation, respite period will continue for a long time. That option becomes less likely, and therefore it becomes more likely that she will get rid of him as per a disengagement trigger, and possibly it might be being treated like this in a sustained devaluation causes him to think, I've had enough of this, and I'm not putting up being treated this way. I don't see he's quite at that point, but it's certainly getting closer for him. Accordingly, the sustained devaluation continues. She's focused on herself, he's left to his own devices, and of course, as always, in a marriage with a narcissist, it is not a happy union. I'm H.G. Tudor. Thank you for listening.